Hello everyone, sorry about the delay there, just trying to work out how everything works. I was connected to the wrong stream, but never mind, that's what happens when you drink too much Pepsi Max. So just to get us going, I'm Parvez, I'm from Veda Consulting, and we're running these streams to kind of get everybody to be able to access, us as an organization, the knowledge that we have, and more importantly, trying to just walk through things that people out there might just do. So we're a CiviCRM consultancy. What we do is CiviCRM and nothing else. So we kind of hear everything that people say about struggling to do things like installing in Civi and WordPress. So these sessions are interactive, so please do try and take part. If have a chat, ask questions, we'll try and answer them as we're going along. If anything breaks during the attempt to get Civi installed on WordPress, I would imagine it's exactly what you guys would see if you tried it. So expect some things to break is what I would say. I haven't done this on this server. I've not been through the instructions for a while. I was obviously a technical person a long time ago, but these days I'm more running the business and do things like that. So I thought it would be interesting for me to actually try it as well. So grab your teas and coffees. Hopefully this won't be a too much of a struggle, but we can go through it together. So let's just get this moving. Okay, so I'll be sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Let's just get back to WordPress. So you guys will be able to see me and the chat going on. You might see my puppy in the background who has decided to disappear, but you might see him come in every now and again. If anyone sees him weeing or doing a number 2 anywhere, shout, because I'm gonna have to stop him. So the idea of today is that we're going to do a CiviCRM installation on a clean WordPress site. So I've set up a WordPress site. It's wpdemo.civicrm.tv, and I've got it there. I'm looking at the instructions on civicrm.org. That's what I'm going to follow to do this installation. So I'm going to try and follow it to the letter. And if there's things in there that I wouldn't do in a production site, or I might do a little bit differently, I will try and point them out as I'm going along. Otherwise, we'll follow it as it is, and we'll see how we get on. Also, I've got this server. The server that I'm on is I've got SSH access to it, so I can obviously get into it and do things. So if you're following along, you do need SSH access ideally. If not, FTP access is fine. You may struggle to do everything with just FTP access, but again, see how you get on. So I'm just logging into it. So this is a CentOS server. Again, normally you might do this using Ubuntu. That's the kind of standard, but I thought I'd try it with CentOS 8 and MariaDB 10 and using everything that is native to CentOS 8. So I'm not trying to install anything that is outside of its release components, because I want a system that I can maintain going forward. So I'm trying to stick to its components. Okay, doke. So first things first, let's log in. The WordPress is into the admin. I've got my username and password saved there from before. This is a test site, so there may be things in here that I'm not doing as production. If it's a production site, I would expect WordFence on there as a minimum. I'd expect a few more plugins and a bit tighter connection. A bit tighter security and setup on it. Sorry. Yeah. So I think we've got a few waiting. So whilst we're waiting to join, I'm just going to go and find out where my puppy is. So give me 2 seconds. Come back. Come on. Okay, he's sunbathing in the garden, so let's just leave him to it. Okay, look, so I'm into my WordPress, and the first thing I would suggest you do is to make sure that your WordPress is up to date. So whenever I install WordPress, there's always some updates. So in my one, I've got just a theme, so I'm just going to update them. I want it as clean as I can get it before I start, so I'm just going to do that. So that's updated. One of the niceties of WordPress is how easy it is to kind of do that. It can be difficult because it can also break other plugins or the system in general. Okay, so I'm now at a clean installation. Everything looks good. No red warnings anywhere. So let's get on with the instructions. So before installing, do I meet the requirements? So let's just open that up. What is that saying? Operating system. So there's very little detail in there about exactly what you need. My experience over the years, I mean, we've been doing this for about 10 years. With Veda Consulting. Before that, I've 3 or 4 years of implementing CiviCRM, so probably 14 years in total. And I would say that you can't run Civi in an environment that maybe you would just put a straight CMS on. You do need an extra bit of power. So as a minimum, I would say a 2 gigabyte installation is the absolute minimum. Is probably I would put a Civi on in terms of a decent size. So 5,000, 10,000 contacts. I mean, that's small. We have implementations with over 1 million contacts. So, Civi can scale. There's not a problem. But it's just the starting entry point to Civi. You probably want it around that area. CPUs 2, 4 is great. Whatever you can get. The RAM is the most important thing because it is quite resource intensive. Choosing your hosting, so I'm on a VPS because it's easy for me to just fire one up and use that, and it also gives me a bit of control over turning it off and not paying for having to use it and things like that. If you can, my advice is to go for a VPS and try and run your production environment that way as well. If you can go full blown physical hosting, even better. If you want to go into the cloud, great. It's not the cheapest way to do it, and you do need to be aware of where your data is going to be held. CMS, so I'm on WordPress, and my version of WordPress is the latest one, so that should be fine. We've got a suggestion for future sessions around WordPress for Drupal, so if you're interested in that, try and upvote that suggestion on ideas.civicrm.tv. Joomla and Backdrop, I'm hoping no one's going to be offended when I say I'm not worried about those right now. I would look at Drupal and WordPress at the moment if I was looking at a fresh implementation. Okie doke, so just going back up, I'll scroll down a bit there. So PHP, what version am I on? So let's go back to my server. As I said, I did a default installation. I've been installing everything out of the box. So 7.2.4 is what I'm on, and 7.4 is not compatible. 7.3 recommended, but it's incomplete on some versions of Civi. So 7.2 is perfect. It should be backward compatible if I did want to migrate something in as well. So that's fine. So the PHP extensions. So now these. My advice here is get them all installed. The last thing you want is to try something and then it breaks and then you're stuck behind some technical blocks like not being able to access server, not being in the right place, etc., etc. So I was trying to get servers, especially production servers, with everything they should have or could have on there before we put Civi on. So we're going to do the same thing here. So with these, I'm not going to go into each of the PHP documents. They're quite long-winded, but they give you an idea of why they're needed. I've got a small cheat sheet that I'm just going to go through. So let me just bring that up. So I'm going to install the math extension. So that gives me math, or maths if you're in the UK, but you know, I'm hoping we've got some international visitors. I'm just going to restart HTTP. One thing I forgot to mention. So before I do all that, one of the things again that I normally do is I will run a PHP info file. So let me just run that. Again, it's not a production system, so I'm not worried. If it was production, I might stick everything behind HTTP password before I did this, but it's not a production system. I'm not worried about it. So this is just a PHP file in the root directory of WordPress, and it will tell me at a glance what I've got or what I don't have. So if I look now, so now I've got BC Math configured and in. Curl's already there. Yeah, so the next thing is curl. I've got DOM XML. So again, I just need PHP XML because I've got DOM already. So let's just see. Yeah, DOM's already there. So let's get PHP XML in. Cool. And I've restarted HP again, so just reload that. Yep, DOM XML is there now, so everything is on that side's set. Let's go through the next one, multi-byte, initialization and proper characters. So sometimes we do migrations from other character sets that got special characters in them. If you don't do that, sometimes it can cause problems. The actual installation is of MB string, so I've just got that again ready to go. So let's get MB string in. Let's put that on. Okie dokie. So just going to restart the HP server. So going back to my info, just refresh that. Yep, so I've got MB string installed as well now, and it's all set and ready to go. So that's good. And then what do we have? PHP Zip. So PHP Zip is they recommend the PECL install, not the built-in one. Again, with the newer versions, it's kind of changing. The recommendations are always moving around a little bit. So we're going to go with the PECL one. Again, I've got that kind of held over here. So let's run that. And I'll just restart HP again. And again, refresh my PHP info. Yep, so Zip's there now and all installed and ready to go. So you can kind of see my approach. I like to check every time I've installed something. If it was a production server, I might even be taking snapshots throughout this process just so that I've got something to go back to should something break or it's not quite the right implementation. I can always get back a step or two. But as we're just going through the documents, I'm just going to go straight through this and not really back up anything. So the final one is international. It's for localized formatting and strings for 528. So this kind of coincides with the whole UT8 FMB4 or whatever it's called implementation. We'll talk a bit about that a bit later, but let's get that installed as well. So again, I've got my PHP International, yep. All good. I'm going to restart that as well. Cool. And let's see if we can just check that is running. Just that. Cool. So I've got my PHP International running as well. If I tried to install something that was already there, it would tell me it's already there anyway. So I'm not going to do any harm by running the commands. Oh, one thing I did forget to do, I didn't do an update, so let's just do that now. So yeah, again, production, I would be running an update before I started, just to make sure that everything's up and running. So there's one package that got upgraded there. Cool. All right. So let's go back to instructions. Where are we? So we've done that. PHP SOAP. I know I said before I normally put everything on, but I'm not going to do PHP SOAP because we don't use CiviCRM.Tea, and most of the implementations of Civi these days will use a third-party service like Amazon's Mail Services or Mailgun or SparkPost or something else. CiviCRM.Tea was a great service in its day. I'm not sure who uses it these days. Okay, doke. So we're not doing PHP 7.1, so we don't need to worry about encrypt. This has caught us out a number of times. So if you do go from 7.1 to 7.2, things like your SMTP passwords will get lost. So all of a sudden your system will stop sending emails and you won't know why. And it's simply because you moved up versions of PHP. So something to be aware of. Make sure you've got access to the passwords. If you're using something like SparkPost, you can't get access. You can't get back to those passwords, so you have to set up a new key. So they're just things to bear in mind. All right, PHP configuration. So memory limits, 256 will be fine for me. I'm not doing anything major. We have clients where they're in the millions of contacts. They'll be up. There might even be 1 or 2 gig in terms of memory, because unlike a website, straight CMS, you've got users actually carrying out business functions. So those business functions might be to update, 2,000-3,000 records at a time. They may be to import 20,000 contributions. There could be all kinds of things they're doing. So those are quite memory intensive. Often you hear of people saying, well, Civi is inefficient because it's kind of asking for that level of memory. It's not that. It's the level of work that's taking place, the amount of processing that you're doing to the data. It's not really that Civi is inefficient. It's just PHP in the way that it handles memory. And when you multiply that by hundreds of thousands of transactions, the memory requirements go up, and they almost go up exponentially. So it's kind of trying to bear that in mind when you're scaling your system. So let's set that out. How do I find that? So this is where my PHP info comes in quite handy. So if I have a look at, let's see, where's my ini file? Okay, so this is telling me my PHP ini files in etc. PHP. So let's get back to my command line. And I'm in as root, so I don't need to worry about sudoing everything I do. And again, like I said, this is a test system. I'm not worried about the security on that side of things at the moment. I'm not going to put any live data in it. Okie dokie. So I think mine is set to 128. Yep, 128. And I can cross-check that again in. I can cross-check that again in here, and if I see the memory limit, I've got it set as 128. The other thing to bear in mind is the max input bars. If you have got batch processes and things like that you're running, I would recommend you up that as well. Otherwise, when you're doing batches of stuff, your limit works out as about 50, and that's not normally enough. You want to do more. So we tend to increase that. Civi's a lot better at it now. It's not so much of a problem, but you might as well increase it. It's not going to do any major harm. So let's go back. So let's put that to 256, and max import vars, so I'm just going to put that in. I'm going to go up to 4,000 on mine just because I can, why not? And the other one I'm going to change is the execution time. So again, that's where a lot of systems that we take on that have been implemented by someone else, that's where they often report issues that are intermittent, or you know, they're difficult to track down. Often it's because these params aren't quite right, so you end up with a load of issues. Where are we? So that's that. Input vars, memory limit. Okie doke. Cool beans. So I think that's fine. We can. Oh, the input time, we could increase that. I'm not going to. They're very rare situations where we do have to adjust it. We're not gonna worry about that right now. So write that, quit that. Let's restart Apache. I need to restart my FPM as well, or reload it. So I'm going to do that because I'm running HTTP Apache with FPM, with the PHP FPM module. That's the one that's recommended for CentOS on higher traffic sites. So if you're running Civi with 20 users, then I'd say go FPM if you can. And they're all default modules anyway, so it's no harm to do it. Okie doke, where are we? Right, fine. So MySQL is the next thing. So the instructions talk about MySQL, but it's really interchangeable with MariaDB. MySQL and MariaDB are effectively the same engine underneath. So sometimes you will see commands that are switched as well. So for instance, so I'm running MySQL version and it's MariaDB I'm actually running, so it can be a bit confusing. So with CentOS 8, I can install MariaDB 10.3 onwards. You get all kinds of extra features. I don't know if MySQL 8 has this, but MariaDB 10 introduced encryption at rest, a few tweaks on the memory and things like that. So if somebody did access your server and copy your files off, then the data would still be encrypted. If you're using 10.1 or 10.2 onwards and you've encrypted it, you've set it to encrypt at rest. Often in enterprise implementations, they'll ask for that. You kind of have to have that. So one option is you do the entire server. The other one is you do each component. So that's worth bearing in mind. So what do we have to do for the version? So 10.02 or greater. We're fine. We're at 10.3. Don't need to worry about that. I'm not MySQL 8, so I'm not going to worry about that. The configuration, InnoDB. So these things are all set by standard anyway. What I will show you is what settings we've got. So let's log into. So again, I'm logging as root. Production system, I won't be doing that, but it's a test. It doesn't matter. Let's get my password. Okie doke, I'm in. So I'm going to check what have I got. So it talks about InnoDB. So how can I check what my system set as? So if I do show engines, that shows everything that's available for this version of MySQL or MariaDB. He's out cold, so that's good. And you can see what the default is. So my default is InnoDB. Sometimes Civi will still throw up errors. So if other parts of the system or a developer goes in and creates a MyISAM table inside CiviCRM's schema, then Civi throws up an error saying you're running MyISAM when you're not actually. It's just one or two tables in there someone's created as MyISAM. So this is the way to check. And if this is set and Civi throws a warning, I wouldn't worry about it, because there might be the odd table that is MyISAM, but the integrity of the database depends on this InnoDB, because it allows foreign keys and relationships and enforces child records. If you didn't have that, you're potentially going to end up with a not an inaccurate database because some of the child records won't be there, or parent records. So we are good there. Thread stack. So the thread stack. I've got that there. So I'm just going to show everything, like all the variables that set in MySQL that are like stacks. So my thread stack is 299,000 roughly, and these guys are saying it's 192, so I'm fine there. Triggers are by default, I think. We'll find out. I'm not sure. They should be. I've never explicitly had to turn them on. Now this I would just ignore for now. Like they're saying it doesn't really matter anymore. I've never worried about it. I think it's real edge cases where it's a problem. So I tend not to. I don't want to overforce my MariaDB settings to a place that could bite me later on. So I'm not going to do this unless I hit a performance issue, which I won't, because I'm on such a new version of MySQL, it won't matter, and I'm on the latest Civi. If you plan to have multiple languages, I don't, but if I did, how do I do this? So it's on the OS, so if I exit out of MySQL, so I can see at the moment my system's set to US, and this is the OS, right? So this is CentOS level we're talking about, not MySQL and not Civi at this point. It's just the operating system itself. So if I want to see all the available English locales, then I can just run that command and it will show me that these are what we've got. The UTF8 is the most portable of the character sets, or locales. So we're going to set that. So let's again, I'm just going to set that, and now if I run the status, now I'm running British, because we like to spell organisation with an S and not a Z. That's why. Not that I've got anything against it, but yeah. Okie doke. So that's all fine. Let's go back to the instructions. So I'll set my locale. Future migration. So this is the UTF8 UTF8 MB4 change. So if you want to be able to use emojis, I'm trying not to put one on right now, if you might notice, but if you want to use emojis in emails, or more importantly, if you've got Chinese characters and you need to store them, then at the moment UTF8 in MySQL is a little bit broken. Historically it's always been broken. It's a little bit broken. You wouldn't see it in a normal implementation, in a Western implementation, because it's such a discrete break that you wouldn't really notice it. But if you're running character sets that require a large amount of a large storage space, then you will start to see the problem, because the way UTF scales is it doesn't allow the row size to be long enough to store the characters you need to store. So MySQL, in order to kind of get around it, they couldn't change UTF8. It would break every single implementation of MySQL. So they introduced this new character set, which is the actual correct UTF8. So you don't explicitly set it. What you do is you set these settings, and then in the driver you say you want to do it. So if you don't have these settings, you can't set it UTF-8 MB4, because the row length will never be big enough. Now I've already set all this, but I'm going to do it again. So let's just have a look. Where would I go to do this? So let's go. So it's not here. Let's just click that. Okay, doke. So again, newer versions of MySQL, everything's hidden away in the conf.d directories, not in the my.conf, which you might be used to. So if I cat so we can see settings in here. So these are the server settings. So in the server settings is where I put what I want my collation server, what I want my default character sets to be. And I also need to say when a connection comes in, I want you to set that. So because sometimes if you've got WordPress or whatever talking to MySQL, it may not specify the character set, or it may specify it to UTF8 without the MB4. So this is going to make sure that when that connection comes in, it connects with the right character, sets it to the right character set that you want on your database. So I've set those there. And then the clients, again, I'm making sure that that any client specific connections are MB4 as well. So again, just checking there. So I'm setting the default character set to UTF MB4. So once I've set those two things, then I should be my database should be good to go. Like I shouldn't be having any issues with it. So I can check it, and the way I can check it, this is going to be irritating. I'm going to keep logging in and out of this. So let's get my password again. So the way that I can check it is I can run a show variables again, and I should see UTF-8 MB4 across the board. The system is set to UTF-8, so we already know that CentOS is set to UTF-8 English, but everything else, the server, all the client connections, everything is set to UTF-8 MB4. So we're good, we're all set there. And that covers that off. We're not using MySQL 8, so we don't need to worry about the native password. The time, I'm not going to worry about it for this. I'd make sure that my date is set correctly on my server. I have to log back out. It's not. I'm set to central time. I don't know where, maybe an hour forward. I haven't set it on mine. I'm not going to bother. It's fine. I'm not running production. Okie doke. So the permissions you need. So now we're getting into setting up a user for CiviCRM to use, and a database, no doubt. That's kind of weird. It doesn't talk about a database here. Oh, I'm in the prerequisites, right? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So this is talking about the permissions that I will need. Now, for a test implementation, I'm just going to grant everything. I'm not going to bother to grant individual bits like that. I'm not worrying about bin trust function creators. This is all great if I'm running replicated servers and I'm doing things like that, but I'm not doing any of that, so I'm not going to worry about this. Cool. Okay, so I am through the requirements, and that took half an hour. Blimey. Okie doke. So I can start doing the installation. I've got my WordPress up and running. Download it from the CiviCRM website. So let's go and do that. So we're going to do 5271. Just going to copy that link. Go back into here. I'm going to go back into my root directory. Where does it say I'm supposed to copy it to? Okay, doesn't say. So I'm just going to copy it to my root directory. Okie doke. So that's all fine. So I'm just gonna unzip that file. Oh, it's probably unzip. Oh, let's try to see if that does it now. I'm just guessing, but let's just see. No. So I need Zip. I don't have Zip on my implementation. It shows you how many times I've tried this. There we go. So now I've got my CiviCRM directory there. So what am I supposed to do next? Copy or FTP the zip file. Well, it's saying do it that way. I've already got it, so I'm gonna copy this entire directory over to my. So that's the location of my. That's the root directory, the doc root, if you like. And in there, I want to put it in WP content and plugins. Okie doke. So let's go and check that that's all there. Yep, got my CiviCRM. So I can see the permissions are wrong, so I'm just going to change that. And if I'm not doing the commands as seasoned Linux people would, then I'm sorry. It's not really my day job, to be honest. So cool. All right. So that I'll just make sure go into CiviCRM. Yeah, that's all good. Everything's owned by Apache. The web server's running as Apache, so that's all good. So I need to create a plugins files directory. So again, I'll just make sure that it's accessible by the web server. Okie doke, we're good there. That's fine. We've already got CiviCRM, so I don't know what that's talking about, to be honest. I've extracted it already, so I'm kind of ahead of all that, and I've got that directory. And does it contain CiviCRM.php and a README? Let's just check. So yes, it creates this. It's got CiviCRM PHP and it's got a README, so we're all good. It's going swimmingly well. Localization. 99% of the time I would do this. I can do this later, so we'll see how we get on. I haven't seen any of the questions. I'm going to take a look in a minute to see if there's any questions or anything. But if we have time, we can do this at the end. We can localize it. So for now, I'll just go straight ahead and try and turn on CiviCRM. So enable the CiviCRM plugin and run the installer. So how do we do that? Log into your WordPress site. So I'm in my WordPress site. Fantastic. Go to the plugins page. So I'm in the plugin page, and now I've got CiviCRM. Hey, progress. Let's close that. We don't need that anymore. Click the activate. So let's do that. It's probably all going to fall over in a heap. No, we didn't. Amazing. And we're all green. So if you didn't quite follow the instructions before, you'll see red somewhere. So for instance, if the memory wasn't set quite high enough, then that line would be red. If I didn't do UTF-8 before, then that would show up red. So this is a kind of, if I didn't follow the prerequisites properly, then I've still got a chance to fix it before I get into the system so much. I can't do a language, a bar United States, because I didn't do the localization. Like I said, I can always do that later. I don't need to do it now. And what I haven't done yet, is set up the MySQL side of things. So let's do that. So what I could do, and I think what this is going to do, is just use, so So this is all set to use the same credentials that WordPress is using. So whatever user WordPress is under and whatever database WordPress is using, it looks like Civi's picked that up and it's going to use the same credentials. Now, in our implementations in prod, we would never do that. We'd never let Civi use the same database as WordPress or Drupal or any of the other CMSs, because we want Civi to be portable. We want to be able to take Civi out and do things with it without it being linked to the CMS. So it works the other way as well. So if we're waiting for the CMS implementation or anything like that, we don't want 2 partners or 3 partners potentially working on the same database. So having them separate kind of makes that a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier with backups. It means that you can segregate the data, the tables that don't need to be exposed as well. You can it gives you a lot more flexibility. So after having said all that, I'm just going to I'm going to do it the way that I wouldn't do it, but it's just easier. It saves me the aggravation of setting up a user. And I'm going to load in some sample data. So this is obviously, you only want to do this if you're messing about and just trying out CiviCRM. If it's a production system, I don't want sample data in it. But like I say, it's a trial system, so check the requirements and do it. So let's see how this goes. Oh, it's done. So this is saying CiviCRM is installed and ready to go. So let's do the checklist. Cool beans. All right, so I'm in. I've got my most favorite bit of Civi, the system status error, and it's telling me I need to do stuff. So let's just go in there and have a look at that. I think the aim for today is that we get through the initial configuration at least. So these are the errors. I can just hide them if I'm not really interested at this point. What I'm going to do is just go through and just run the configuration checklist, because if I go through the configuration checklist, I should get rid of a few of those. And I'll be honest, this is a little bit painful, but let's do it. So localization, I don't want US dollars, I want GBP. If I wanted all currencies, I would just take that away. That would be all currencies. But if I want to specify the currencies, then I can just pick them. I don't want the default to be US dollars. Again, I'm doing that. Default language. So I haven't done the locale stuff. So really, I don't have that. I just have United States anyway. With the inherit CMS language, again, I don't know of any sites that we've got where they're different. So for us, we normally do that. We've done multilingual before with Drupal, pushing through the locales and then telling Civi what language to run in. That has its own set of issues, but if anybody's interested in that, shout on ideas and we can show you how that works. Monetary values all fine. Available countries, so I am just going to put the UK, and I'm going to leave all countries available because we might have data from all over the place. I'm not enabling multi-language. Like I say, it's a topic in itself, and there's some strong caveats to enabling that. So let's save that. Okie doke. So now I've got one green. Yay! All right, organization with a Z. Amazing. Let's do that. So default domain. I'm going to call this Civi. Looks good enough to me. I need to give it an organizational address. I don't need to actually. Let's see. I'm going to try and do as little as possible here to just get through this implementation. So I'm going to just put in CiviCRM.Tea. Save that. Let's see if that gets a screen. That's got a screen. Great. Enable components. So this is quite important. What do I want my Civi to have in it and available? So if I want pledge, for instance, I normally want reporting. I probably want campaign. I'm not too interested in grant. And case is good, but I don't need it just yet. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And you should see the menu change now. So with campaigns have come on board, and I will have Civi case in there somewhere. It's not showing up. That's interesting. Oh, it's probably not enabled. Yeah, that's fine. Register my site. So I'm not doing that. It's just a demo site, so I don't need to worry about that. It's gone green anyway, so that's fine. Display preferences. So how do I want my screens to look? What do I want the defaults to show? I've got the opportunity to decide that now. So when I'm looking at a contact, which tabs do I want to show? So this is different to ACLs, right? So this might be a bit confusing as to why am I setting this here? Because surely I want to control that by users and by roles, not as a default across the board. But this is a default, so it's kind of saying if you looked at a contact, you had all the permissions you could, what would Civi show by default? So I will leave it as it is, because if I want to override that, I'll use ACLs and I'll use other ways to do it. I wouldn't normally control it from here. Viewing smart groups. So smart groups are great ways of keeping dynamic groups. So in effect, they're like saved queries. So if I wanted to have a group of all blue-eyed people who live in London, then I'd use a smart group, because as people move in and out of London, that group would adjust. The downside of a smart group is that it can be resource intensive. So this setting is saying, should we always calculate that group whenever you go into a contact, which, if you've got 100 users on, that is potentially going to be very heavy on the server. Or should I only do it if somebody actually clicks into the groups and has a look? That's much better for performance. The downside is your groups tab might show empty when you are part of a group, because Civi hasn't worked it out yet. So there's pros and cons to that. It's up to you which way you set it. We normally set it to show on demand, because with the smart group access, we train the users to know that that's going to show when you go into the group. That's when you're going to see who's in it. Editing. So what do I want the edit on the top? When you click into the contact, what do I want that to show? So again, I can add and remove stuff. I'll just remove the suffix. We don't use that much here. So contact details. So again, what do I want to show? So I can change the order of this stuff. So I can say I want to see the website first, the email address. Let's do that. And then the phone number. And then the other panes, what panes do I want? Again, I can choose the order. I'll just mix them up a bit. The contact search. So this is the advanced search. What do I want people to be able to search on? So I haven't got pledges on, so it's not going to show up. But if I did, it would. I can choose what I want to show. I can't decide order here. I can only turn it on or off. Check for similar contacts. So Civi does deduping, and you've got options as to whether it does it interactively. So as I'm typing, does it show me the duplicates and show me the possible matches, or should it do it when I'm saving? I'm going to tick mine to when I'm saving, because I don't really want to be interrupted every time. If it's a large database, I don't want to be, typing the first name and the last name and suddenly I'll get presented with 100 possible duplicates. So my recommendation is on save. As long as you're not putting too much information in, then you want it when you're typing. Notify activity assignee. So in Civi, when you create an activity and assign it to someone, it will by default send them an email to say you've been assigned this activity. If I want to turn that off, I can do from here, or I can turn it off for specific things. So say don't send them a reminder when we create one of these two. Do I want to include an iCal in those activities? Yeah, I'll do that so that it's easy for them to put it into their calendar. Preserve activity filters. So one of the common complaints we see in Civi is that I have to keep remembering or keep setting the filters when I'm looking at activities, because there's a lot of activities against people. If you tick this, then you don't need to do that. Every time you go into the contact, it'll remember what you set last time, and that's what it will show you in terms of the filters. Contact dashboard. So that's like the one-page summary of a contact. What do I want to show on that? I'm just leaving it. I'm leaving the CK editor in place because we want rich text editing. So these are about now the sort names and the display name formats. So when you look at contacts in Civi, across the top it says, you're looking at John Smith's record. I can change that. So if I change that, then Civi will show the name in whatever order that you've set these as. These squiggly brackets are effectively mail merge indicators. So that's going to replace this bit of text with the individual prefix of a person. So effectively their title, it's going to replace it with, and that's going to be replaced with the first name. That's a space. So you'll see when we look at contacts, you'll see that. The sort name. So when you're looking at lists and when you're looking at when you do the quick search in the top left, what order how should the name be presented? So again, if you're new to Civi, you might just go, well, why is it always last name, first name? I want it first name, last name. Well, you can switch it around here, and Civi will show it in whichever order you want. You do have to run some cron jobs and things to make it rework out everybody's sort name, but it is configurable. Menu bar. So by default, Civi replaces the menu bar. So you see, I've got my menu bar. I no longer have WordPress's menu bar up there, or more importantly, Drupal's one. The WordPress one's on the left. So here I can choose what happens with my menu bar. The front end and back end theme, I'm going to leave them as automatic because I don't want. I want them to be whatever's chosen, but I could override them. I could pick a theme. Again, we've suggested another session about what are the 10 most important WordPress plugins if you've got Civi running. In that we can cover off themes and how you can control that as well, because they do make a difference to your experience of Civi. Save that. Okay, how many of these have we got to do? Quite a lot. Address settings, so let's have a look what's in here. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to change any of this. This is the order of the address for labels and for displaying. I'm fine with all of it. If you did, as an example, we had a client recently. So if we're using department and we want it showing, we're putting department into address 3 and we want it showing on the top, we can just move that. We can just copy that and stick it up there. And then that will show that line before. So then you're seeing the department and then the address name. And probably the more correct position is there. So you might see the organization name, then the department, then all the actual address details. Editing, what do I want to be able to edit? It's all fine. It's quite mind-numbing actually, but yeah, it's worth going through it once at least. Standardization provider. So this is at the moment it's just an American provider. In the UK we have things like Experian or Quick, AFD, Address Book, or a few other suppliers out there. So if you've got a bunch of addresses and you want to send them off to be sanitized and cleaned, then you can do. And some services, like in the US, this service is an online service, so you just subscribe to it, and then it automatically cleans addresses in the background. We've done stuff like that before with Civi in the UK. It's quite a bespoke service. It's becoming less and less important to organizations. But if you've got VIPs and high value donors, then it's worth doing it, because it does give you, it does mean that you don't lose contact with those people. You've got more chance of staying in touch. So again, for this, we're not going to worry about it. So let's save that. Okie doke. Mapping and geocoding. So mapping is if I want to show maps. So for instance, on search results of contacts, on event registration, what type of map do I want to use? So most people, 99% of people will go for Google. You've got the option of OpenStreetMaps as well. There are other plugins, I think, as well. I'm not sure anybody uses them really, but there were a couple of options before. And then for the geocoding, being able to do proximity searches in Civi, so give me everybody who lives within 5 miles of an address, what do I want to use? So again, it's Google's the easiest one to do. There is a cost associated with that, but it's not really major. It works and it's all very, very accurate. So my suggestion is you just go with Google. I won't, because I have to put in a provider key, and I don't have any of that, so we'll just leave it as is. Okie doke. Search settings. So what do I want to do here? So the automatic wildcard is important if you've got a very large database, because you don't necessarily want it to always find people based on the wildcard. So if I just put in Smith, I don't want it to find Smiths and and all the other variations of Smith in there. I want to tell it when I want it to do that. So the way that I tell it is by using these special characters. So if I put a percent in, then, so if I did Smith %, it will find anybody who has a starting string of Smith and any string afterwards, any or no string. So that way I'm controlling the wildcard. So I'm not going to get too many results all the time. And I can use the underscore as well. So that's like a single character. So that's if it's Smith and a space I'm expecting. So singular word Smith, then I could put underscore Smith underscore, and then that way I'm going to get the single word Smith, and any surrounding name for that person it will return. There's some examples in here, so you can have a read of that. Like I say, for large databases I would say no. For smaller I'd probably leave it as yes, because it doesn't really matter on smaller databases. Include email. So in Civi, when you do the quick search up here, it's name or email. So if I don't want it to be email, I can just make that no, and then it will be name only. Search primary details only. So one of the common complaints you used to hear in Civi is, I don't want to just find the primary email address, I want to find secondaries or any versions. So the downside of that is sometimes you get, like an organizational email addresses against 20 people, so you're going to get them all. So there are reasons to that, settings there. But you can control it. You can decide if you want all email addresses to be searched or only primary. Include the nickname. So this might be important if you're an organization like a religious organization where somebody might have a baptized name or some other given names, and you're using that in nicknames, or you're using organizations and you've got parent organization and child organizations at different locations. You might use nicknames for that kind of thing. So it's up to you on a case-by-case basis. Include alphabetical pager. So this is going to have a performance impact, because it's going to get all the results. So let's say I get 5,000 results, it's going to get all of them and then page them and work them out where they go. So if performance is my number one criteria, then I'd make that no, because I'd probably have that set to no, and I'd have that set to no. And that way I'm not expecting hundreds of results. So if they all show up on one page, that's okay. Like that's going to give a better experience to the user than if they take a little bit longer to show up and I end up with a lot of them. So that would be my thought process on it. Include order by. So again, that's all about speed. I would say no if it was a larger database. Having said all that, this is going to be a tiny database, so I'll just leave it all as defaults. Default context search profile. So that is talking about the straight find contacts up here, which I'll just open it in a different window. You can just see, which is just showing name, type, group and tag. So I can change that here and say, well, let's use that. I don't even know what that's going to do, but we'll try it. Then the quick search option. So the quick search is up here. And you can see that mirrors the checkboxes. So if I didn't want my users to be able to search on email, let's say, or phone, street address, then I can change it, and that changes. Does it change? Oh, I need to refresh this. I need to save this and refresh the screen, so you'll see it. You'll see it change. What's this? Autocomplete contact search. I don't know what this is. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is when I'm doing things like in Civi, I can if I've got a relationship, let's say between contact A and B, when I'm creating the relationship, I can pick either contact or create them. So this is saying when you're doing your search, what do you want to show? It's important if you've got people or organizations with the same name across multiple locations, that I might add the postal code, because it will help me see, is that region A, B, C, it will help me see that when I'm picking the contacts, and then I can pick the right relationship. Contact references in Civi, you can have a custom field, which is a lookup for a contact in the database. So if I do that, then again, what contact information would I want to show in it? And the autocomplete, so how many, when I do a search up here, how many do I want to show by default? So that's 10 is fine there. DB full text search. So if I've probably got one customer who's got that turned on. So if you've got a lot of notes and a lot of historical data that you might have taken from an old system, and you don't really know what to do with it, it's not in a format to put it into notes or activities cleanly, and it is all in notes, if you like, or some custom fields, then you might want to turn this on, because turning this on will let someone search the entire database for a string, for a search term. So if you've got lots of information hidden away in corners of the database, then that's quite useful. It is resource intensive on the database, but again, that's a topic for another day. And if you need it, you can the options there. I'm just going to save that now. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat 1 second, see what we're doing. No, nothing. Right. Okie doke. So let's just go through the miscellaneous. Checksum lifespan. So one of the most powerful features of Civi is being able to send a link from CiviCRM that includes a secure piece of information. That means when that contact clicks on that link, the recipient, they're automatically recognized by the landing page. So if I'm John Smith and I click on a link because I received an email from a charity, a user, then when I click on that link, the system, the landing page will show my name or pre-fill the form or things like that. So it's really powerful. It means you don't have to worry about logging in. You don't have to worry about users remembering credentials and knowing how to do things, because the system can work it all out for you. And it also means you have far less duplication issues, because the links are all personal. So what this is saying is, if I was to send one of those emails, how long is that link active for? So if that person clicks it within 7 days, it will work. If they don't click it within 7 days, they'll be presented with a form as though they are anonymous. So that's what they're saying. There is a downside to this. Obviously, if someone forwards that link on to someone else, then potentially they're going to click it and they're going to see the source's details. There is some text in emails that I think tries to clarify that. I'm going to turn on login. I don't know if this is going to break the database, but I've ignored that. Don't worry about that. It's simple. But logging is a key one. So if I was doing a production site, I would 100% have login turned on. If I was doing a production site and I'm in the data migration process, then I'd turn it off, and then turn it on once I go live. What this will give me is a field level audit of every single change in the database. So if there were data issues, or people asking why did this change, then logging gives you the ability to see exactly when it changed and what it changed from and to, and potentially who changed it. So again, production, I would turn it on. Attach PDF to receipts, entirely up to you. If you do, then it adds a PDF as a receipt. If you don't, then it includes it as HTML. It's not always clean like that. So again, it's up to you. So this is how do I want to record letters. I can either, if let's say I pick 100 people and I do a mail merge letter from Civi, do I want that recorded as one activity with 100 people in it, or do I want it as 100 activities? Personal preference is entirely up to you. There are some pros and cons, but they're much more around activities and why you would or wouldn't use them and how you would use them. So not for today, really. We don't need to worry about this right now. This is the PDF generator in Civi. If you're doing like 200 or 300, sometimes it can get really slow, or even run out of memory. So WK-HTML to PDF is a much more efficient plugin. So if you do hit performance issues, or you're kind of running a database with millions of contacts, then you probably want to install WK-HTML, and here you're just giving it the path. So then Civi will use that instead of the default PDF generation. Displaying powered by Civi, I don't want to do that. As much as I'm pro Civi, I don't want it plastered all over public facing forms. So maximum attachments free. This is about internal usage and controlling how much people put on to contact records, or how many things we store against them. I can change that if I want to. Maximum attachments for backend processes. Okay, so this is inbound stuff. So if we set Civi to read an email box, something like that, how many attachments, what's the maximum number of attachments it should pull from that source? That's 100. That seems quite high. I probably wouldn't have it that high, but that's the default, so I'm going to leave it as it is. The maximum file size. So if you're going to change this, you need to change it in PHP as well, because the two settings are linked. I think it might be somewhere near that number by default, but just bear that in mind. I'm going to leave it anyway. Allow second degree relationship permission. So if I had a parent-child relationship, or employee-employer relationship, do I want one of the contacts to be able to see the related contact if they were to log in? Do I want ACLs to work that way? You probably don't, unless you're doing quite specific stuff. If you're doing kind of regional systems or branch related systems, then you're more likely to use ACLs and different roles than kind of use the secondary permission and relationships. There's, like I say, there's kind of cases for it. I'd have a read of what the detail of that is. Size of the recent item stack. So I can't actually see it here, but in Drupal, there's a block on the left that shows me my recent contacts, what I've looked at. So it's just how many do I want. I won't worry about that. It's just what do I want to see when I'm looking at the recents? Do I want to see groups, cases? Doesn't matter. I'd leave it default. Default limit for dedupe. I'm saying 0, so it can be as many potential dedupes as possible showing up. So previous next default, the cache for it. Large database, I might use Redis. Medium, I'll probably leave it as either default or SQL. So it's kind of up to you. It's real detailed stuff that I wouldn't worry about it if you're just starting out. Accept profiles from external sites. We normally say no to that. That is effectively submission, embedding my profile form, so my data capture form, in a third-party site and allowing it to submit through to me. It's kind of fraught with issues, because effectively I'm allowing a third-party database to write in-form information, and it can get a bit skewy. So by default it's now off. You can turn it on if there are specific examples. So one example might be you've got child sites that you run, and you want to embed your own forms in those child sites. So there it'll be okay. If it was a third party site, I probably wouldn't do it. But yeah, again, it's up to you guys. Allow alerts to auto dismiss. So when those alerts, like the system warning, came up, can it disappear by itself without me doing anything? It's default to yes. If you didn't want that to happen, you wanted to use it to acknowledge every single error, then I would say no. Recaptcha. So if you're using Civi forms on Civi profiles, then you probably want capture on them. And if I did, then I would set capture information in here. Save that. I don't know how much more we've got of this. Oh, there you go. Well, that's what I thought was going to happen. So yeah, 2. Let's try 2. Okay, so that's fine. Contact types. So what contact types do I want by default? So these these are put in by the sample data. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. I would just have individual, household, and organisation. So these have been added by the sample data. If I wanted to add more, I can. So, for instance, a student is a subtype of individual. So if I go context, new individual, I have student there. So again, this is down to your requirement and what you need to do. I'll just say done for that. And I've gone somewhere else. Let's just check my configuration. So I'm getting down to the last few things. I don't think I need to go through it all the way. From email address is going to cause you a whole bunch of problems if you don't fix it. So what I need to do is set something. So I'm going to say what I'm saying is my default from address, what is it? And when I'm doing things like mass emails or individual emails, sorry, my brain is slowly stopping. What do I want to set it to? So I set it to that, and then when users send things, they will have that as an option as one of the from email addresses they can send from. Again, it's a good way to make sure that your users are using standardized comms and not just whatever they want. So that's that. Let's go back, check what else we've got. Outbound email. So yeah, let's just do so. When I'm testing, I might want to redirect this to the database. I don't want live emails flying around when I'm testing out, trialing out. Another option is I use a service like Mousebonds. So here I've got a Mousebonds account, and this acts like a third-party email. I would use a service like this if there's clients involved. We don't use external ones, we use internal ones, but if you don't have the setup for an internal one, then you can use a service like this, and then your clients can log into an email box and see what their customers would have got. It makes the experience much more realistic. If I'm testing internally in the kind of dev environment, then I would just redirect to the database. So I'll just redirect to the database on mine. Payment processes. So hopefully the W ones are great. So if I wanted to create them at this point, I could do. Normally, when you're trialing out Civi, you're not really at that point where you're going to start doing that. We can do other sessions on how to set up payment processes. Let's just carry on. Civi contribute component settings. So what do I need to do here? So do I need to give the CVE code? When back office, no, we do get some clients saying, can you turn that off? I'm not sure what the thinking is behind doing that, but maybe if you're getting postal forms and things like that, maybe, I don't know. But we would normally say yes. Automatically update contributions when membership type is changed. So if, for instance, I change somebody from a student £10 membership to a full member at £100, then should the contribution that was pending or has partially been paid, should it change as well? So it's quite a cool feature. I would say yeah, if I'm membership. Enable access control by financial type. So that is quite a useful thing to have. If you have different departments who need to do reporting on certain things, or cross-continent access, then sometimes it's quite useful to restrict access by financial type. You can only look at financial elements of the system that relate to your country. So I'll turn it on. I'm not going to use it, but I'll turn it on. Always opposed to accounts receivable. So Civi's has kind of got some accounting features in it. I don't know that I'd use it as an accounting system, but there's necessity for some areas of accounting. For instance, deferred income and things like that. I'm just going to ignore it. We can cover that in a different session, all about accounting in Civi if you want to. Again, I'll leave that. So these are showing up because we've set up test data. So these are effectively, when it comes to paying an invoice, what page will people get directed to when they click the pay button? So we would set up normally I would set up a separate page for that. I'll just pick one of these because that's what's there. And credit notes. So if you do cancel a contribution or you refund an invoice, what should the credit note be set to? Enable tax and invoicing. So if you're UK and you want to do VAT, this is how you enable VAT. If you're in the US, again, you can do it. It doesn't quite do the cross-state taxing, but a lot of scenarios it will cover off. So if you do need to do it, it's quite useful. And especially in the UK, if you're doing that, it will do 90% of what you need it to do. This combined with setting up the financial types is the two areas that you need to do. I'll leave it on. Let's do it. Tags. So they're the tags that come with the default. So tagging for an organization, normally how I explain this is a tag is an attribute that sticks with that contact. So the fact that I've got blue eyes, for instance, probably I don't actually have blue eyes, but if I did, that will be a tag because it's not an attribute that is how I'm segmenting the data. It's an attribute about that person. So for instance, if I've got an interest in IT or I've got an interest in football, then those things would be, I would say, are tags. And then I might create, me as an organizational user, might create some groups and segment that data. So for instance, everybody who likes football and is above the age of 40, I might create a group from that. So that question comes up quite a lot. When should I use tags? When should I use groups? My explanation is always try and do it that way. There are exceptions always. I'm just going to leave all this as default. Manage groups. So groups is the same thing. I've got a few groups set up. Great. They will come out of the box. Custom fields. So again, in Civi, I can create data handlers for things that I want to store. So if I did want to store ethnic origin, for instance, then I might create a custom field to hold that information. And I can create those custom fields as select lists, as free text fields, as lookups of other contacts. I might say who is the main contact or who owns this record. That's quite a common one we see. Then you might do that as a contact reference field and pick a different pick an existing contact from the database to populate that data. So it's powerful. It means that you can tailor your CiviCRM to hold the information however you want to hold it. And these custom fields can be attached to different entities. So for instance, if in an activity I want to hold extra information, then I can create one for that. Or if I want it to hold it against a contribution like there, then I can. Profiles. So if profiles are effectively shop windows into Civi, so I've got all my data in the database, if you like. So let's just do this search and show you what I'm talking about. So I've got, let's have a look at one of these. So I've got his contact record or her contact record even. And if I had an online form that said, right, if I'm going to create you as a contact in my database when you fill in this form, I don't want them to see everything. I might just want to capture their first name, last name, and an email address. So I do that using profiles. So I create a profile that has those bits of information. So maybe that one. So let's have a look. The supporter profile, just captures first name, last name, and email address. So if I wanted to create a quick form to allow people to register their interests, for instance, then I could just throw that up online and they will be able to fill that in, and that will create a contact, or it will find an existing contact and do an update to them. So they're profiles, and I can create as many as I want. There's some reserved ones that you can't change, or you can change but you can't delete, and they're used for different things. So again, I'll just leave all that as standard. And then I've got component specific. I am thinking I'm kind of out of time on this. I don't know. Let me just reach out to the guys and see what they think. But I've got the same kind of settings in all the components. This isn't. It's actually taking me to Oh, all right. So these are just taking me to the sections of the documentation about those components. So in theory, I should click through them and read all about them, but I'm hoping I already know what they're about. So I'm just going to close them all down and try and get this all green. If I can do that, then I can quickly check my system status. And I should be all green there as well. I haven't done the cron, so that's the only thing I haven't done. So let's just see. That's the same one. Let's go there. Okay, so I haven't done the cron. I'm doing a default mailbox. Okay, so let's do that. Surprised that's not in the configuration checklist. Okay, so the default mailbox is, it's just, I have to set at least one mailbox in Civi, so I'll just call it I will just call it CiviCRM.Tea. I'm not going to worry about any of this because I'm not setting it up to read from anywhere or do anything. So what I could do in Civi is set it up to read from an inbound mailbox. So let's say I had hello at CiviCRM.TV as an email inbox, and I want Civi to go ahead and read that box and create contacts from it and record the content of the email in CiviCRM. Then I could get Civi to do that, and I would use an IMAP or POP3 processor, and then I would set it to email to activity, so that way every email is going to end up as an activity in CiviCRM. For mine, I don't care. I'm not actually doing it, so I can just save that, and Civi will think I'm done. So that's that bit. Let's check what else we've got. Extensions. Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly have a look. What do I need to do here? Okay, it's because I turned on the financial types, so I can use this report. It's telling me, and then the outbound server, I haven't enabled it, but I know that anyway. So I'm hoping that's been useful. I'm not sure who's around anymore, but I'm hoping that's been useful. I need to go. Oh, my dog's come back, and he's got something in his mouth. So let me just deal with that. So I have puppy duties, so I'm hoping that was useful. Like I said, we're doing this every 2 weeks, so if you have any suggestions about what what you'd like to see, try and upvote them on ideas.civicrm.tv, and we'll go through them. If you have questions or anything, please do fire them out. We'll try and answer them. And if you've got any tips about how to look after puppies, let me know. Thanks a lot.